So as we begin our training, I want to start by asking you a few questions about the students at your school. So do some of your students give up easily when they're faced with a challenging problem or concept, something that they haven't seen before? Do they give up easily? Another question is, are your students worried about looking smart? Looking smart. Another question, do any of your students get extremely upset and sometimes shut down when they make a mistake on homework or especially on a test? Do your students wrap their self-worth up in their report card? And do your students have performance anxiety when it comes to their grades? And they just get stuck when something is really, really challenging and really difficult. So if you answered yes to any of those questions about the students at your school, then this training is for you. And it's called Turn Pedestal Kids into Gritty Kids by Implementing Growth Mindset. And this is something that we were able to do at our school over 6 years ago, maintain that transformation for over 6 years. And it's been really incredible. And today we're going to learn how to do that. But before we get into that, these students that we have at our schools, sometimes in private school education and independent schools, we know that they are really concerned about their grades, or maybe I should say the parents are concerned about their grades, and there's a lot of pressure for them to perform, and maybe they've been told you're so smart, and then they hit something they've never seen before, and all of a sudden, like this guy in our photo, they just kind of shut down. But at our school, I want to start by at the beginning and tell you the story of the pencil incident. That's what we refer to it now as, but it was back in the fall of 2015, and it was a Thursday afternoon, kind of a rainy Thursday afternoon, and a fourth grader walked up to the teacher's desk and stood there and said, "I need a pencil. I don't have a pencil." Said, "I don't have a pencil," and just stood there and waited for the teacher to solve his problem. And of course, after a moment or two, the teacher said, well, what are 2 ways that you could solve that problem? And then the student went and borrowed a pencil from a classmate. But what we were noticing with our 4th and 5th graders at our school is that there just seemed to be this learned helplessness, and we were really trying to put our finger on what exactly was the problem, and more importantly, what could we do about it? And so what we landed on is that our students were lacking in resilience. They lacked resilience. And you can see here, of course you know this definition, that when there's exposure to compressive stress, so think about that foam rubber or that Nerf football, and there's compressive stress and it returns to its original form. But students that when they're under that stress and then they don't return to that form, they cry or they get upset or they shut down, then they're not showing that resilience. They're not pushing through. They're not showing that elasticity, that ability to bounce back. And so we began in the fall of 2015, over the course of the rest of that school year, to search for the best way to teach resilience. And kind of the bridge from the problem to the solution, we know that Albert Einstein, one of the smartest people that ever lived, and he said, it's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer. And so we were searching for that, building resilience and staying with problems longer and not shutting down, and all of that led us to Carol Dweck from Stanford University and her research on mindset and how students learn and how they perceive their own learning, and her book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, over 30 years of research. And what we were learning about when we got into growth mindset is that a couple of quotes from Carol Dweck, it's the belief, a growth mindset is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. You see, people with a fixed mindset, they believe that the amount of ability or talent that they got at birth, that they got a certain amount of math ability, a certain amount of language arts ability, a certain amount of sports athletic ability, and it's fixed and it just is what it is. Well, we know that that's not true, but some kids think that that's true. Failure is not a permanent condition. How do the kids at your school react when they make a mistake, when they fail? Also, Carol Dweck believes that learning about the brain increases perseverance. So actually teaching kids about neuroplasticity can increase their ability to stick with a problem longer because they understand how the brain actually works. So that brings us to this little cutie on the pedestal. I said that the title of this training is How to Turn Pedestal Kids into Gritty Kids by Implementing Growth Mindset. But this is one thing that's really important for you to get in this training, and that is that she's up on that pedestal, but she did not put herself up there. Other people put her up on that pedestal. So, how did she get on that pedestal? Well, the adults in her life told her, "You are so smart. You're so smart." And probably her parents, maybe a few of her teachers. And so now she's on the pedestal and she doesn't want to get knocked off that pedestal. And what we were seeing with our students is that instead of taking a chance that they might get found out and seen as not smart, that they would rather refuse to try something that they hadn't seen before rather than attempt it and fail at it and be exposed as not being smart and get knocked off the pedestal. And that's huge because the kids are on the pedestal. They didn't put themselves there, and it's our responsibility as educators to get them off of the pedestal and help them develop a growth mindset. So let's get into this. A fixed mindset, on the left side of the diagram, a student with a fixed mindset, it leads to a desire to look smart, and therefore when they come up against a challenge, they avoid the challenge. Again, I want you to be thinking about the students at your school as we go through this. Are they on the fixed mindset side, or are they on the growth mindset side? A student with a fixed mindset, they come up against an obstacle, they give up easily. Effort, just grind, stick with it. They see it as a waste of time. And students with a fixed mindset, when you give constructive criticism as a teacher, they ignore it, they are offended by it, they see it as negative, not useful. And then when someone else succeeds in class, someone else wins the spelling bee, they win an award, they get the best grade on the test, they feel threatened by that. They're not happy for that student. They feel threatened by it because, again, there's that fear that they're going to be exposed and that they're going to be seen as not smart and knocked off of that pedestal. And so as a result, students with a fixed mindset, they plateau early, they achieve less than their full potential, and they have a deterministic view of the world. And see, this is what we saw at our school. We saw that our students were cruising along on their natural intelligence and ability up through third grade, and then in fourth grade, they would start to encounter problems, tasks, challenges that they hadn't seen before, and they would just shut down. And I would see literally students slide the piece of paper back across the table to the math teacher. And these were some of the brightest math students, but they had never come up against a math problem that they didn't already know how to do. And so they would shut down. So that's the fixed mindset. But the growth mindset, which is what we want to develop in our students, and I'm going to teach you today how we can teach that at our school and have kids internalize it. The growth mindset, it leads to a desire to learn and therefore a tendency to embrace challenge and to persist in the face of setbacks and to see effort as the path to mastery. Effort is worthwhile. It's how you get from point A to point B. And then learn from criticism or learn from mistakes and not fear them. And then if there's someone who does succeed, they find inspiration in the success of others. And so as a result, they continue on that trajectory of ever higher levels of achievement, and they have a greater sense of free will in their own learning. So this is a poster that you would see at our school. We're going to talk about posters in a few minutes. We're going to talk about environment and language and all those kinds of things, but just this visual, very vivid, that padlock, that fixed mindset, and the growth mindset with everything is on the table, everything is an option, everything is available through that effort. So I mentioned the research, 30 years of research from Carol Dweck. And what you see here, I'm just going to take one quick piece of that, and you can dig into that yourself if you would like to. But what we have here is that there were students, fourth grade students, who were given a problem that was on a sixth grade math level, sixth grade math problem. And so the students tried the problem, they did the problem, so on and so forth. But then what you see on your screen is the brain activity after 6 weeks later, when the group on the left, they weren't taught anything about growth mindset during the 6 weeks in between the first problem and the second problem. They just went on about their life as a fourth grader, and they just kept going along and doing their schoolwork and going to school. But the students on the right-hand side, that group, over the course of those 6 weeks, they were taught about growth mindset. They were taught about effort leads to better results, and how mistakes are how you learn and how you grow. And they were taught about neuroplasticity and how you can build a new neural pathway in your brain. And they were taught all about growth mindset for 6 weeks. Here and there, not consistently all the time, that wasn't their only content for 6 weeks, but they were taught about growth mindset. And so 6 weeks later, the researchers came back, gave them another problem that was on the sixth grade level for fourth grade math students. And on the left-hand side, you see the brain activity from the students who didn't learn about growth mindset. And what they did is they just a few of them tried it, but most of them just gave up. But on the right-hand side, you see that brain activity because of the training that they had, and they gave it a go. And isn't that what we want from our students? We just want them to try. Just try. Get in there, muck it up, make some mistakes, just attempt. But a lot of times our students are stuck, and the reason they're stuck is because they're on the pedestal. They don't want to be sold out as not smart, and so they stay on the pedestal, refuse the work, and they're stuck. And so the rest of this training, we're going to talk about the 5 ways to teach growth mindset. And we're going to do that by talking about scope, environment, language, mini lessons, and parent communication. And so first of all, well, actually, before we jump into that, this is a good time to pause and just remind you that there are guided notes to go with this training, and there are resources that are linked in those guided notes. And there are also the mini lessons that I mentioned on bullet number 4. There are 5 mini lessons that are the actual mini lessons that we used at our school starting back in 2016. We still use them today. And I've shared the Google slideshow and the student handouts, the speaker's notes, all the things that you need to be able to teach growth mindset 15 minutes a week for 5 weeks. Control the environment, change the common language that you're using, and you will see these results. And so again, those guided notes can be found at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 4, theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 4, and you'll have everything that you need to be able to do this together. So let's get into it. The 5 ways that we're going to teach growth mindset and turn pedestal kids into gritty kids. First of all is scope. So when it comes to the end of the year, the last week of December, the first week of January, a lot of the commercials on television are for fitness centers and health clubs because you want to lose that holiday weight, And everybody knows that if you try and exercise and work out, and you're doing it with other people, with somebody at the health club, that you're much more likely to lose the weight. So if you do something that's hard, but you do it with more than one person, your chances of doing it successfully increase dramatically. So at your school, what's the scope? How big will it be? Will it be you and one colleague across the hall that are going to go all in on growth mindset with your students? Maybe it's a grade, maybe it's third grade or it's fifth grade. Maybe it's a department, it's the math department. Maybe it's a division like intermediate school or middle school. But maybe it's just you. And you need to remember that you are the one that's in control of the culture in your classroom. And your students need this, your students deserve this. And so I'm going to give you everything that you need, but the larger the better as far as the scope, but you're in control of the culture in your classroom and you'll have everything that you need. So then let's talk about environment, because I think environment and the language are really the two most important parts of how to teach this effectively to our students. So first of all, it has to do with the safe space that you're going to create in your classroom. So you're going to intentionally create a space that is emotionally safe in which your students can fail. So the body language, the eye rolling, the sighing when this student over here got it the first time, but you're going over it the second or the third time. Well, that doesn't make that student feel emotionally safe when you're allowing the snickering or the comments or that was a stupid question or the body language. And so as hard as it is to make the classroom a safe space so that the students will try and that they'll know that if they fail, that if they make a mistake, that it's a safe space in which to make a mistake and they won't receive some kind of negative social pressure from their classmates if they do. Another thing that you can do with your environment is to share your own growth mindset moments. So students think that teachers have it all together. I think we've always had it all together. And especially the age of the students, third, fourth, fifth grade, they really look up to their teachers still. And you sharing your own growth mindset moments is very, very powerful. And so something that you overcame an obstacle academically or in sports or in your life, and your own growth mindset moment, how just pushing through, more effort, sticking with it, the strategy, the stamina, how all of that work together to help you get from point A to point B and to overcome that obstacle successfully. It's very powerful. And then posters and more posters. So let me show you what I mean. So we have a quote here from Thomas Edison. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try just one more time. So to your students like Star Wars, here's Yoda, the greatest teacher failure is. The first attempt in learning is a way to reframe the word fail. Do your students like LeBron James? There are growth mindset quotes. Taylor Swift, growth mindset quotes. Superheroes in Marvel movies, growth mindset quotes. Harry Potter. And so, of course, if you're going to Google something and you're going to Google LeBron James growth mindset quote, if you're going to print that off on your copier, make sure that it's royalty free or that you're giving credit to where it came from. But you can print that off on your photocopier at school, and those can be in your classroom. You don't have to go buy expensive laminated posters on Amazon or go to the teacher supply store. And the students can even come up with their own little favorite mini poster for their desk. So just think growth mindset quotes, think what's popular and what they're really interested in, connect those two things. I'll give you one quick example. When I was a teenager, my favorite athlete was Michael Jordan, and one of his most famous commercials is about how many times he was counted on to take the final shot in the game and missed. And he said, because I failed, that is why I succeed. So, growth mindset quotes and those posters. So, that's the environment that we've created. Now, let's talk about language. So, our teachers at our school never praise talent or ability. They don't say, oh, you're so smart. What we do is we praise effort and strategy. So think about that for a minute. The language that we use is so powerful. So instead of telling them how smart they are, every time they show that effort and strategy and stamina, then we're praising them for that. The power of the word yet. Someone may say, a student may say, well, I'm not good at math. I'm not a math person. You put yet on the end of that sentence. I'm not a math person yet. I am not good at basketball yet. And then this is a big one, celebrating mistakes. So we celebrate mistakes at our school. And we'll say things like, that was the best mistake all day. Now I know how to help you. And when you celebrate mistakes and you turn it into something fun, then the kids get more comfortable in making mistakes. And so, again, this language, when we go back to scope, the language can be just in your classroom, but it's more powerful when it is in a division or in a grade and there's more than one teacher. And so what happened at our school was we implemented this in the fall of 2016 in our 4th and 5th grade in our intermediate school, and all the intermediate school teachers were on the same page with the language. And so it was like a broken record. They would go from classroom to classroom to classroom with celebrating mistakes and praising for strategy and effort. And the next one, failure is not a permanent condition, teaching them that they can actually get smarter by trying hard things. All of that language just reinforced, and it started to take hold as the students continued to hear that, like I said, like a broken record. And I already said, share your own growth mindset moments and emphasize the productive struggle. And so kids might not understand what that phrase means, productive struggle, but you know what that means is that that's the brain is like a muscle, and so they're using that to they're exercising that to continue to grow. And so again, the language that we use, celebrating mistakes, yet all of those things that you see here, super important. Some other things that we do with this poster, you'll see at our school, is just instead of this, try that. So instead of thinking, well, I just give up. Well, I could use a different strategy. Or I made a mistake, and then they just shut down because they made a mistake. Well, it says, I made a mistake. Mistakes help me to learn. And so again, if this is in their room, if this is there for them to see, then they can just start remembering that they can always have something else to say. And it's just that getting stuck, and that they're just there and they're stuck. And if we can get them to change their language and change the way that they're thinking, but change the way that they're talking, then again, it just is reinforced, and then it takes hold, and then it just really it makes an incredible difference. So before we get into the next phase of what I want to talk about, we've talked about scope, we've talked about environment, we've talked about language, and we're about to talk about mini lessons. I want to tell you a little story about something that happened at our school shortly after we implemented growth mindset. So this was in the fall of 2017. Actually, it was in January of 2018, when every year at our school we have an 8th grade versus teachers faculty basketball game. And so one of our teachers, Miss R, 5th grade teacher, was going to play in the game, and she was talking to the 5th graders that day, the day of the game. And she was like, oh, I'm no good at basketball. I'm not even going to make one basket. And immediately the fifth graders called her on that, and they're like, Miss R, that is not a growth mindset. And one of the kids in fifth grade made a sign, Miss R, all you need is one basket, just one. So she made that sign, took a picture with Miss R, and then later that day at the game, in the stands, holding the sign, waving it for Miss R to make a basket. Well, when that student was in fifth grade, Miss R didn't make a basket that day in the game. So I think it got hung up in Miss R's room, and it was kind of a nice little fun memory. But then something happened the next year when that student was in sixth grade. She showed up at Miss R's door on the day of the faculty basketball game and said, I need that sign back. And she sat in the stands as a sixth grader and waved the sign. But Miss R didn't make a basket that day in sixth grade either. But then in seventh grade, this same student came back to Miss R's classroom, asked for the sign, sat in the stands, waved the sign during the game for Miss R to make just that one basket. All you need is one basket. When this kid was in seventh grade, Miss R didn't make a basket that year either. So now we come to eighth grade. And in eighth grade, this student is actually playing in the game because it's the eighth graders against the faculty basketball game. And that student showed up at the door of Miss R's classroom and said, I need that sign, and went and took it and handed it to a seventh grader to hold and wave in the stands during the game while she was out on the court playing in the game. You know what happened? Miss R made that basket, that one basket. And you can see that the students are as excited as she is because this has been a thing that they've been talking about for 4 years. That growth mindset moment where she said, I won't even make one basket. And they reminded her, all you need is one basket. That's not a growth mindset. And then after the game, they posed for a picture, tore that sign in half because she had made that basket, and the teacher became the student, and the lesson was growth mindset. That's pretty powerful. And I told you that story because I want you to see that this is real and that this gets internalized into kids, and that they can go from being on that pedestal to having grit and having resilience and having persistence and perseverance. And the way that we're going to get there is with these tools of these 5 mini lessons. And so with these mini lessons, introduction to growth mindset in lesson 1, lesson 2, neuroplasticity, lesson 3, self-talk, lesson 4, grit, and then lesson 5 is a review and an application activity. So let me tell you how we do it at our school, and you can do it however you want, because the first thing that you might be thinking is, oh my goodness, I can barely get all my curriculum in. I don't have time to do this. I don't know when I'm going to find time to do this. Okay, they're called mini lessons for a reason. So the first week of school, we have one of our teachers in 4th grade who, for 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, lesson 1, let's just say it's Wednesday, the first week of school. Introduction to Growth Mindset mini lesson. Then on the second Wednesday of the school year, lesson 2, the third Wednesday, lesson 3, the fourth Wednesday, lesson 4, and the fifth Wednesday, lesson 5. So we're talking 15 to 20 minutes a week over the course of 5 weeks. And then the other things that are happening are the things that I talked about before. So the scope, how many people are doing this? The environment, the emotionally safe environment where you're not allowing that body language or the snickering or the side comments to be made. The language, where you're putting yet at the end of a word. You're not praising intelligence and ability. You're praising effort and strategy and stamina. And you're like I said, you're putting yet at the end of the word. You're at the end of the sentence. You're celebrating mistakes. All of that over the course of the 5 weeks. And it is so intuitive for kids, so intuitive. And what you're going to see, and this is actually a screenshot of the bottom of the handout that I mentioned. And the handout that I'm talking about is available at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 4, where you'll be able to go and just click on Google Slideshow. You'll be able to click on the student handout and print it out and actually just use these resources for free, just as I'm describing them. So I want to walk you through one of the lessons. We're going to walk through lesson number 2. And what I've done is just pasted the slides right into this slideshow of lesson 2. So here's the first slide of lesson 2. And this is about, excuse me, this is about neuroplasticity. And so we give this handout to the students, and then we ask them to kind of just say, do they agree or strongly agree? And it's about making mistakes and how they feel about making mistakes. And they feel a certain way about making mistakes, that's for sure. But then what we're going to do is we're going to teach them about neuroplasticity. You might think, okay, these kids are 9 and 10 years old. Can they learn about new neural pathways and brain plasticity? Yes, they can, and it's very intuitive. They very much understand it. There's a video link there to a 2-minute YouTube video that is fantastic. And then slide number 3, if you've ever changed a bad habit, worked through something challenging, or thought about something differently, you've actually rewired your brain. And then this is where the magic happens. We ask the students, have you always known how to ride a bike? Did you always know how to ride a bike? And of course they say, well, no, I didn't always know how to ride a bike. I learned how to ride a bike. So then we ask them, well, how did you learn how to ride a bike? How did that go? Did you just learn, you got on it and boom, you just rode? Well, no. It was wobbly and I fell, and my mom or my dad was hanging on to the back, and then all of a sudden, after a long time, after a short time, whatever, it just all kind of clicked, and then there I went, riding down the street. It's how most kids how to learn how to ride a bike. But what we teach them then is what was happening is the new neuro pathway of riding a bike, the legs working with the arms, with the balance, with all of the complex large motor and cognitive skills that it takes to ride a bike, all working in unison. That didn't exist, but then a new neural pathway was created, and then that pathway does exist, and the child knows how to ride a bike. They get it, they understand it. And so then we talk about there in the speaker's notes. There's about some research with mice and how they were put into an empty cage and did different tasks and things like that. And then we just asked them to talk about a time where they practiced something and got better at it. The teacher could share something, what helped you to work through your challenge. And so again, that's 15 to 20 minutes. And then the last little piece is that we'll slap that slide up there and ask them, what do you think? What do you see? What do you think when you see these images, when you see this? With that padlock and with the growth mindset images on the right-hand side. So that's a mini lesson. That's just 15 minutes. That was about neuroplasticity with the video and just a little bit of discussion about the riding the bike, and they get it. And so that's one example of the 5 lessons that are there for you to be able to use with your kids. So we've talked about scope, we've talked about environment, we've talked about language, we've talked about mini lessons, and then finally number 5 is parent communication. So this is a tricky part because sometimes parents are a little resistant, a little hesitant at first when it comes to hearing about process praise or the productive struggle, because again, some parents, as we know in our independent schools, they're pretty focused on grades and they're pretty focused on getting things right. And remember, they might be the one that was saying, "You're so smart," and helping put that student up on that pedestal. And so we have to approach it in a thoughtful way. And so one of the things that we do as teachers is sometimes we have to educate the parents. And so there might be a question of the day or a question of the week. It could be that you have a weekly newsletter or however often you communicate with parents. And it could be something that aligns with what you're teaching them, your students, about growth mindset. My advice would be to hold off on explaining process praise at the beginning, because you might get kind of a negative reaction to that. What I've seen work effectively is to start to implement growth mindset, and then the students start to develop that resilience and that perseverance and being more comfortable making mistakes and developing that growth mindset. And then you can start sharing growth mindset moments in those little emails that are like the rock star moment emails to the parent. And those are very effective. So for example, one of the students persevered through a difficult challenge, and you just send a few sentences about that off to the parent. Great job. Now you're planting the seeds for what you're going to teach them about eventually. And later on, towards the end, I'm going to show you that in the resources, there's actually feedback in a Word, a document that's going to give you a lot of help with that as far as the feedback is concerned, because in some of our schools we write report card comments, and we're giving feedback to the kids, we're having parent-teacher conferences, and we want to be consistent in the way that we're communicating. And so again, share their successes and use that growth mindset language. So why is this so important? Why do we want to do this? Why do we need to do this? Well, what I want you to do is a little thought exercise, and I want you to take a minute and I want you to think about a specific student at your school. And that's one of the students that at the beginning of this training, when I was talking about the one that shuts down and gets stressed out and gets all upset when they make a mistake, and I want you to think about that student. Okay, you have them in your mind? So now I want you to think about that student 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 15 years from now. That specific child that you're thinking about right now, 10 years from now, are they still trying to act smart and not get sold out because they're still up on that pedestal? Are they still refusing to try hard things? Are they all wrapped up with performance anxiety, all tied up in knots? And is that student stuck because they're still displaying a fixed mindset? But I want you to think about it from a growth mindset standpoint now, and think about that student 10 years from now, 5 years from now. They've developed resilience, perseverance. They don't shut down. They don't cry when they make a mistake. They see that a mistake is like no big deal. It's kind of normalized because you normalized it for them, and that's how they learn. And you taught them about that wobbly, falling down, bike riding, neuro pathway that they're building, making those mistakes. That's how they learn. That's how they grow. You've taught them that. Something comes into their life, they're going to try it. They can take a breath. There's so much anxiety among adolescents today. And I'm not saying that growth mindset is going to fix all of it, but growth mindset takes a big chunk out of it when it comes to the performance anxiety with our adolescents as it relates to school, especially in our independent schools. And it helps to close the gap between potential and performance. So I want to show you a couple of these resources, but there's one more slide that's very important. It might be the most important slide of this training that's next. So I want you to stick around for that, please. But this is what you'll find at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 4 is that in addition to the guided notes, at the bottom of the guided notes, you'll find links to Carol Dweck's TED Talk, a keynote address that she gave. Angela Lee Duckworth talks about grit, growth mindset kit, that neuroplasticity video. This is what I was mentioning before, number 8. There's a list of words, just one word of feedback that all is aligned with giving feedback that aligns with growth mindset language. Other resources from Edutopia, Growing Your Mind, Growth Mindset in the News, all of those kinds of things. So you've got the mini lessons as well, and I showed you that slide before, but on the handout that you'll receive just underneath these resources, you have those mini lessons where you can click on the links to the Google slideshows and to the student handouts and all of the things that you need right there. But this is what I was talking to you about. A couple of years ago, on the first day of school, one of my fourth grade teachers did the lesson number 1, growth mindset, mini lesson. Introduction to growth mindset. And then afterwards, things are settling down. They're transitioning back into something else. That fourth grader walked up to the teacher and quietly said, "Now I don't have to keep acting smart." Number 1, a 9-year-old is acting smart so that they don't get knocked off that pedestal. That's scary, but it's true. And it's our responsibility to take them down off of that pedestal. And how can we do that? Well, scope. What's the scope going to be? Is it just you? Is it a colleague? Is it the person across the, is it the grade? Is it the division? Is it the department? Scope. Then what about environment? Are you going to create a safe space in which your kids can fail and make mistakes and not allow those side comments and the eye rolling and the sighing and the snickering? Are you going to plaster posters all over the place that are growth mindset moments? Are you going to share your growth mindset moments? Are you going to create an environment where growth mindset can flourish? Number 3, language. We talked about celebrating mistakes, not praising talent and ability, but praising strategy and stamina and resilience and effort. Effort, praising that effort. We talked about other things with language, putting yet at the end of a sentence, sharing your growth mindset moments. And again, I know I've said it a bunch of times, but just celebrating mistakes and making your classroom a safe place to try and to fail. And then number 4, the mini lessons, all of that is there for you. And number 5 is the parent communication piece. Getting them on board. And you do that by sharing the students' growth mindset successes. And then the parent starts to see, wow, this is something it's really great. It's starting to build this resilience. And so as we wrap it up, I just want you to pause and think again about that student that you were thinking about before. Our students need this. Our students deserve this. Many of our students have a fixed mindset, but you now are equipped to teach them with your colleagues about growth mindset. I've seen it with my own eyes transform kids at our school, and that's my wish for you. Will it be easy? No. But if you stick with it, if you work with your colleagues on it, if you follow the plan, if you use the mini lessons, if you use that common language, you are going to see the change in your students. It's going to be intuitive to them. They're going to get it, and you are going to change their lives with this growth mindset, intentional training. And so I'm so happy that you took the time to do this. Those resources are available for you at theprivateschoolleader.com/episode 4. And I hope that you will use this with your students and that you'll start to see those successes, that they'll see that they don't have to stay on that pedestal. They don't have to keep acting smart, that they can learn how to be resilient, and it will make a difference academically, but it'll also certainly make a difference in their lives. So best of luck to you with the rest of your school year, and thanks for participating in this training today.